What's going on, guys? It's Cimoooooooo. So today I'm bringing to you my top 5 competitive budget decks for the October 2020 format. You know, not everyone can afford to buy a playset of Lightning Storm that costs over $300, or even a playset of Triple Tactical Talents, which is going to run you the same, but that doesn't mean that you can't compete with some of the top tier decks, because there's so many powerful strategies that you can play for about $100 to $150 US, and that may seem like a stretch considering we're talking about budget decks, but I feel that compared to some of the $400, $500, $600, maybe even $700 decks that you can play and still not do as well with, that is an absolute bargain. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So kicking things off at number 5, I've actually got a tie because both of these decks are fairly good budget decks at the moment, but they're going to be receiving much more support in Phantom Rage, which at the time of recording this video is going to be released next month in November. And those decks are Burning Abyss and Zodiac. Now, both of these decks don't necessarily have the highest win rate in the online environment at the moment. I believe Burning Abyss is hovering in the low to mid 40 percentile, and I think Zodiac's actually at the higher 40 percentile, so not the best, right? But the thing is, these are both very affordable decks that do very powerful things that can actually help combat against some of the top tier strategies. Burning Abyss is actually starting to look sort of like a combo deck of sorts when you can just spam the field with Burning Abyss monsters and link off into some absurdly powerful link monsters and really just set up a board that's really difficult for your opponent to deal with. Remember, Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche is legal again, which is a very good thing because that essentially adds 2 extra negations to any single board that you can build with Burning Abyss, because Burning Abyss and the Phantom Knights just synergize so naturally together. And the deck is actually relatively cheap. You can play it very heavy control style if you want to incorporate some trap cards, or if you want to play a little bit more of a combo style that just kind of puts a bunch of monsters on the field that are difficult for your opponent to deal with. Either way, the deck is actually fairly good. And Zodiac is kind of in a similar way because both decks are very controlling. Zodiac's not going to assemble a massive board by any means. You're more so going to be doing one of 2 things. You're either going to be trying to control the pace of play, or you're going to go into something like Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops, which is a card that's unaffected by monster effects, and hope that your opponent doesn't have a way to out it because it is a really big monster and being unaffected by monster effects is really good. And when Zodiac can make that with a single card, I mean, that's really good, right? Having a win condition like that in your back pocket for some of the top meta strategies is really what a budget deck needs in order to compete. Remember, you want to have some unfair elements to your budget deck when you're planning on which deck you want to play, and having something like that is definitely a boon. Now, neither deck is necessarily excelling at the current moment, but the thing is, Phantom Rage is right around the corner, set to be released in November, and with it is going to come a slew of new Phantom Knight support, which supports Burning Abyss because the archetypes meld so well together, otherwise known as PK Fire for anyone who doesn't know. And so being able to play some sort of Burning Abyss Phantom Knight deck with the new support, you're getting in on the ground floor. And by picking up these Burning Abyss and Phantom Knight cards early before the deck gets super hyped once the set is officially released, then you might have a tier 2 or maybe even a tier 1 deck on your hands that you got for a fraction of what it would cost you if you paid it a month from now. I think that's incredible. And when we're talking about Zodiac, Zodiac gets to look forward to AA Zeus, and this card single-handedly put Zodiac back into the competitive format in the OCG. This is one of the most absurdly broken Yu-Gi-Oh cards I have ever read, and Zodiac takes full advantage of it. So if there's a card that can essentially revive an archetype from unplayability to putting it at some of the best tiers of competitive play in the format, again, obviously it's format dependent because the OCG format differs from the TCG, that's definitely something you're going to want to look out for. And if this card can do it, you can bet that those Zodiac cards are not going to stay cheap for long. So by picking them up now, you can enjoy them while you can. But then when this card comes out, you are going to be absolutely happy that you made the investment. And so for those reasons, that's why I have both Burning Abyss and Zodiac as my number 5 spot. But coming in at number 4, we have a deck that I didn't think I'd be talking about anytime soon, but that deck is Goki. Yeah, Goki of all things. I don't know what kind of time warp we're living in that we're going back to like 2017, but Goki's actually having a little bit of a resurgence right now. What's so cool about Goki from a budget perspective is that all the cards are super low rarity, and even their support cards are super low rarity as well. So the main deck is actually very cheap, and that means you can spend a majority of your budget on getting the extra deck cards you need to ensure that you're able to play the deck, and it's a combo deck at that. So you're even able to afford cards like Crystron Halki Fibrax to be able to combo off because your main deck is so relatively inexpensive. inexpensive. Part of the reason why Goki is competitive again is because Goki is able to set up a multi-negation board thanks to in part to cards like Rusty Bardiche and also some Link monsters in the extra deck that the Warrior monsters make good use of. And by having the ability to do so, but in such a budget shell, you're playing something that's very reminiscent of like tier 1 combo decks, because when you have cards like Goki Rematch that basically ignore all of your opponent's interruption, and then you can just pretty much set yourself back up to where you were before. I mean, being able to not only set up a combo board, but also play through your opponent's interruption at that's just absurd. And one of the incredible things about this deck is that it is so inexpensive that you can even afford to play cards like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon in your extra deck, and that might be the most expensive card that you're playing, and that's just incredible. I mean, if you're a combo player that loves playing combo decks, but you can't afford stuff like Infernoble Knight, because Infernoble Knight's probably going to run you like 3, if not 4 times the price of this deck, you're still going to get a Warrior combo deck, funny enough. Isolde is just one hell of a card, but you're still going to be able to have that experience of being able to build a crazy board for your opponent to try to deal with, or trying to crack your opponent's board when you're going second, because the Goki cards are so recursive, being able to get you so much advantage, and that's just amazing. And so for all those reasons listed, that's why I've got Goki as my number 4 spot. Do not underestimate this deck. Now coming in at number 3, oh boy, we have a deck that everyone's gonna love to see on this list, and if you haven't already figured it out, it's Sky Striker, baby. Yep, Sky Striker's still doing great now that Widow Anchor is back at 3. You have 3 Kagari, that's pretty frightening. You know, Engage is still banned and Multi-Roll still at 1, but the deck is just fine. The deck's able to compete with some of the best decks in the format, and it does it very well. Now, there is a bit of an asterisk here, because I think one of the big reasons why people do like Sky Striker if they're playing it at the top tiers of competitive play is that thanks to a card like Accesscode Talker, it is fairly easy to OTK your opponent in a lot of instances, because it's so easy to go up the chain of Crystron Halki Fibrax to Selene, and because you're playing so many spell cards, Selene's going to be able to get you your Effect Veiler off of Halki Fibrax, and then you go straight into Accesscode Talker and can immediately just end your opponent's life. I mean, it's super simple, it's super clean, but it's super effective, honestly. But the thing is, Accesscode Talker's kind of out of our budgetary range for the purposes of a budget Sky Striker deck, because some of the cards in Sky Striker can be a bit costly. Maybe not necessarily the Sky Striker cards in general, but depending on what sort of hand trap lineup you might be playing, or other cards in the extra deck. But there are some ways that we can circumvent this. You know, Accesscode Talker doesn't push the budget of this deck too far beyond what we've already set at the beginning of this video, but if you're really trying to make this as budget friendly as possible, you know, there's always Utopia Double. Utopia Double still works just fine, and it is a little bit different because your opponent does have to leave a monster on the field, but that's not actually too difficult considering that so many boards leave Link monsters up and they have to be in attack position. That's one of the reasons why this works. One of the other downsides of playing Utopia Double is that, yeah, you have to play the double or nothing brick, so you're not going to be able to, you know, have the most consistent deck. So there is definitely some trade-offs compared to Accesscode Talker, but again, if you're trying to be budget, there definitely are options. Hell, you can even play Borrelsword Dragon, which may sound a bit extreme, but the thing is, with 3 Widow Anchor, it's super easy for you to steal a Link 2, then summon another monster alongside your Ray or your Kagari, and just like that, you're gonna have a Borrelsword Dragon, and that's another way that you can just OTK. But there is no doubt that Sky Striker is one of the strongest control decks of all time, just because of the way the cards interact with one another. The fact that they're able to generate so much value once you hit that 3 spell threshold in your graveyard, that's one of the reasons why this deck has been able to stand the test of time, even after incurring numerous hits over the course of several different ban lists. People just will not give this deck up, but I think that's great. I think that's so cool to see that a deck like this can still survive and actually be like a solid tier 2 deck in the current format, especially when you kind of push budgetary restrictions aside. But nonetheless, if you're looking for a great deck to pick up and have a nice upgrade path where you want to keep building and improving that Sky Striker deck to make it as best as possible, then there's nothing wrong with that, and I think you're going to be happy either way if you enjoy this style of deck. So for those reasons, that's why I gave Sky Striker my number 3 spot. But coming in at number 2, we probably have the budget hero that everyone just loves to default to at this point, and that deck is Salamangreat. Now, I know some people might be sick of this deck, but it's really hard to not have a budget list without Salamangreat, especially now that every single piece of the Salamangreat deck is budget. I mean, the only thing that isn't budget in Salamangreat anymore is Accesscode Talker, but you can easily swap that with Transcode Talker, which doesn't take away from anything the deck can already do. It just ensures that you have a way to close out games if there is a potential opening. Salamangreat just so so powerful because it can mold itself to the format and adapt rather easily because its engine is so condensed. And as a result of that, you can play specific hand traps to counter what your opponent might be doing. You might be able to play floodgates. I mean, it's very easy to play something like maybe Gozen Match or Rivalry since the entire deck is comprised of either fire or cybers. So you're in a really good situation either way to kind of play your Salamangreat deck the way that you want. The deck is so consistent because you have access to so much graveyard recursion. Signet mining's been reprinted now, so that's a really easy way to ensure you're going to see all your combo pieces. The fact that you have this like kind of hybrid combo control deck, because it definitely can take a lot of steps to your end board, and while your end boards may not be the most impressive, you know, you're going to have a very explosive turn 2 or turn 3, because once everything is set up, that's where you can generate a ton of advantage and make it very difficult for your opponent to win through pure snowballing. I mean, the deck has tools to deal with pretty much anything. Like I said, you can OTK with Accesscode Talker. You've got spell and trap removal in the form of stuff like Foxy, Salamangreat Rage, Salamangreat Heat Leo. Sunlight Wolf is just like an absurdly crazy Yu-Gi-Oh card just because it can generate like a +2 every single turn. Like, I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to play a deck like this, because it really can kind of just cater to all styles. It's also important to note that Salamangreat has about a 51 to 52% win rate currently on the online ladder, and while that doesn't necessarily compete with some of like the tier 1 decks, it actually is also like the 3rd or 4th most played deck at the moment. So even with that much play going up against some of these top tier contenders and still maintaining a win rate of that high, this deck is really not going anywhere and is still able to do well even in the face of adversity of some of these absurdly broken combo decks, even control decks for that matter, that are taking up the top tiers of play. And so for all the reasons mentioned, it really is no surprise that I gave Salamangreat my number 2 spot. But that's going to bring us to my number 1 competitive budget deck of the October 2020 format, and I'm super excited about this one, and I know a lot of you guys are too, because that deck is Dinosaur. Absolutely deserves to be in the number 1 spot because it's so affordable. Again, this deck is another 3 structure deck for pretty much 70% of its deck composition, and then with a card like Pot of Extravagance receiving a recent reprint, that card has dropped in price significantly. I'd say the biggest price barrier you have to face when it comes to Dinosaur is Animadorned Archosaur, but even then, what's so incredible is that since so much of the deck comes from the Dino Smasher's Fury structure deck, is that you could actually budget to play a single copy of Animadorned Archosaur, and then if your budget can go a little bit higher, you can spot for 2. Everything in Dinosaur is so incredibly affordable, and Dinosaur is an absolute beast of a deck right now, and we witnessed this at the Luxury Championship Series 6, where it took up 4 of the top 16 slots. We saw so many different forms of tech cards and people trying to figure out what was going to work. The Dinosaur engine is just so proficient at going first, being able to set up reasonably strong boards. You know, it's not going to be any crazy combo board or anything like that, but when you can set up something like Ultimate Conductor Tyranno plus Dolka, like, good luck playing through that, because that is not easy by any means. And going second, Dinosaur, it just has an absolute breeze, being able to just completely run over your opponent's board, because Ultimate Conductor Tyranno is just the ultimate board breaker. So as long as you can just bait out all of your opponent's cards, or maybe even just drop a Dark Ruler no more, you are going to be sitting pretty, and it's just going to be game over for your opponent. There are so many strengths to Dinosaur right now. It is absolutely devastating. It is crushing the meta. Hell, it is the meta right now. I don't think everyone would have ever thought that that day would come, but I guess we've seen it before with Dino Rabbit. But nonetheless, it is without a doubt the number 1 competitive budget deck of October 2020. So guys, that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. And if you found this video helpful, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.